Today's episode of the Get Your Comic On podcast may contain mild spoilers for the movies, shows, comic books, and games that we're discussing. And, if you're lucky, there might be some PG-13 language. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Hey super friends, my name is Neil and welcome to yet another very special mini edition of the Get Your Comic On podcast. I am here today, December the 25th as you're listening to this and it's just released, to bring you a very special holiday gift as I sit down for an exclusive interview with writer and friend of the podcast, Jeremy Adams, to talk about his brand new Aquaman series which is launching in January 2025. This is a really exciting book. It's got John Timms on art, which should tell you all you need to know about how beautiful this book is, and Rex Locus on colours, as well as letters by Dave Sharp. It is an exquisite first issue that I have had the pleasure of reading. You will be able to pick this up in comic book stores on the 8th of January, and obviously on digital platforms as well, and I really highly recommend that you go and pick this up because it is very, 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 very exciting. And I was really glad to get to sit down with Jeremy and chat about getting into the mind of Arthur and where he is post All In Special and Absolute Power and all that stuff. As we say in the interview, pretty sure this is getting on for the 10th time I've interviewed Jeremy now, so it is always a pleasure. We always have a good laugh. I really look forward to chatting to him as much as possible, and we may just be circling back again on his brand new Green Lantern book very soon. But until then, dive in and listen to my full chat with Jeremy talking about Aquaman #1.
Neil!
Okay. It's been a while. I've not seen you since, what, July? There's a whole 5 months we've not seen each other.
I know. But I see you all. It's weird. It's like, I mean, you've interviewed me a billion times, I feel like, over years, you know?
We might be about to hit double figures.
Yeah, I think so. How are you?
I mean, you are the person I have spoken to the most in my whole journey of this thing.
Really?
Yeah. You are
that's amazing.
You are one of my first ever interviewees back on and I think you're probably the only person that I've done telephone, face to face, and now Zoom call too. So
right.
We're covering all the bases.
We've got the EGOT of interviews.
Yeah. We've done animation, we've done comics. We need to find some live action.
I know, seriously. I know. The brief stint in Supernatural wasn't enough. Call me James Gunn.
Yeah, please. You are a busy man, and every time you and I talk, we are talking about something different, whether it be animation, we've talked about Flash comics, we've talked about Green Lantern comics.
Yeah.
Now you're adding another character to your repertoire.
Yes. I jokingly said I was on the Jeff Johns track. Like just check boxing everything, eventually I'll have to make my own company.
Well, just do it.
Right now I'm just a nerd that they let in the door, it's like,
but that's the best thing when you get to just play with the world that you love like this. And the keys to the DC universe seem to be yours at the moment, but how did Aquaman end up on your radar?
They had asked me to do a Brave and the Bold, like one shot with Miss Martian and Jackson Hyde. And I had pitched kind of like the Blue and different things like that. And the editor, I think it was Ben Mears, he was like, that's too big of an idea. Like, you need to put that in your back pocket for like an Aquaman pitch. And I was like, oh, yeah, I should, huh? But I'm notorious for doing that. Like, here's a great idea that I'll give away. And I'm like, oh, geez, I'm an idiot. So then I texted Paul, my editor on Green Lantern, and I said, hey, if you ever want an Aquaman pitch, I've got one. I would love to do it. And he goes, oh my gosh, this came at the right time. We were trying to figure out what to do with Aquaman. You probably would be great tonally. And so it just kind of all came together. I don't even know why I pitched it, honestly. I think Aquaman scares me more than any. I think it's it feels like an insurmountable hill a little bit. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and they haven't had Arthur Curry Aquaman for a long time.
Yep.
It's a very hard character to, I think, wrap your head around and for people to get excited about in some ways. Um, Even though there are people that are very excited about it, it's just a weird, it's like a character that you're like, well, I don't what's the deal with this character, you know?
It, yeah, it's strange, isn't it? It's you. There's so many different incarnations and iterations of
Right.
him, not just in comics. When you start talking about hook hands, and you
Yep.
start talking about is he with Mirror, is he not with Mirror? But then you go to live action, and you've got the kind of the Jason Momoa version. You
Yeah.
go to Brave the Bolder cartoon, and you've got the more
Yes.
which is one that I absolutely love.
Me too. Outrageous.
And it is it. I can't put my finger on what it is that makes him such a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think that, everybody's trying. I don't know. I mean, Peter David swung for the fences when he did his run. It was very much like, how about he's Tarzan,
Yeah,
and and he's falling in love with a dolphin, and I'm like, wait, what's happening? And then they chop off his hand, and I
yeah,
was like, man, he is just going for broke. But I think, you know, being the son of a lighthouse keeper and having this lineage, and that's kind of where I started. I kept thinking it's sort of like when I was, when they asked me to take over Green Lantern, it was very much the first thing that came to my mind was how much money does he have in his bank account? That was like this schlub Hal, like there's no way he has more than like $13 or something. And with Arthur, I think for me, I was like, gosh, he grew up on land,
yes,
and he must miss hamburgers. Like, he must miss, riding a bike or some of the things. And like what is that duality? What is the element of, and that kind of started me on a journey, like what's his internal thought life? Because now
yeah,
he's a king, now he's a father, now he's a husband, and
yeah,
all of that bizarrely in my mind seem to have happened fairly quickly and all thrust upon him. Obviously continuity and timelines are very strange. And you'll be like, well, he's been alive for 80 years. It's like, yeah, I get it. But like, in terms of comic books, it's like
yeah,
how much, how much is that wanted? How much is that just obligation and
yeah,
duty? And so I think for me, a lot of times when I'm approaching characters, it's like I obviously concentrate on the main character first and try to get a handle on the internal thought life of that character.
yeah,
And in the first issue, very much like this is what he loves, this is what he doesn't love, and now we're going to take it all away, and we're going to take him on this journey, and we're going to figure out who he is. And I mean, in the first 2 pages, I explained that this is not about him as a superhero. This isn't about him. This is about him as something else.
yeah.
And we'll see how that holds. you know?
Well, and that was something that you and I were talking about at Comic Con when I was talking to you about how did you get into that mindset? And I think something which to me is a through line in a lot of your writing is family. And obviously
Right.
you are a family man, and
Yeah.
you've got Mira and Andrina in this book, albeit, maybe in issue one and not for a little while
Yeah.
after that,
Yeah. Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so I was going to ask you about that and that kind of family aspect, and is that an important part of finding your way into a character for you?
Yeah. 100%. I mean, especially when I was doing Wally, that
Yes.
was
Yeah.
a huge part of it.
It's
With
strongly involved.
Hal, it's like Hal is more of Carol is his family, but he was watching kind of everybody pass him by a little bit. Like
Yeah.
as DC turned its focus on the legacy characters, it was like, okay, what does that mean for these other people? With
Yeah.
Aquaman, you know, I think about it all the time. Like, it's the fantasy of Taken a little bit, the movie Taken, where it's just like if you've if my kids have disappeared or my wife has disappeared, I'm going to upend everything to find them.
Yeah.
But in that, what does that say about me? What does that say about what I value? And obviously, he does value those things. I think, though, that there's also an element of the weight and responsibility of being a husband and a father and a king and all that
Yeah.
stuff. It is weighty. I mentioned this on a podcast before. I go, I think it's one of the reasons that we love post-apocalyptic shows and movies is because we don't have to pay taxes. Like
Yeah.
there's this element of like life gets very simple, very quick in those types of movies, and the burden of civilization is lifted off. And I find myself doing that even as a father, even as a husband, and I love it more than anything. But I'll have these nostalgic bouts where I'm like, man, I remember being a kid and
Yeah.
carefree and just being. And I think Arthur has a lot of burden with what he's done, and whether it's like a midlife crisis, or whatever. But I think that he's going to go through a journey that not just like there's bad guys and there's bad things and things we have to figure out, but there's going to be an internal thought life of like, who am I? Who
Yeah.
am I as a person? Who am I as a character? And what do I value? And maybe it'll turn out all right, maybe it won't. And you know, I
Find
have
out.
I had three different arcs that to this story. And
Yeah.
if sales hold, I'll be really excited to be able to tell those three arcs. If not, I kill everybody, walk away, and just,
That's it.
that's it.
Destroy the DCU,
Sorry.
everything all over.
I guess I did okay with those other two, but you know, Aquaman's floating belly up like a goldfish, you know.
And he's also dealing with now having hydrokinesis as well.
Yes.
So
And
all
that was a direct result of that absolute power stuff, the kind of
yeah,
shuffling that
that's
they're
fun.
doing across the, yeah, it is fun. And I think I'm going to try to use it in kind of fun, inventive ways because I think Arthur doesn't know enough to be
Yeah.
told to do it that way. And I think it'll play into some of his other powers and it will lead to him. I have a dog underneath my table that is like attacking me, by the way. He's
I've
like,
shut the cat out. Otherwise, there would be a cat pacing up and down right
yeah.
now.
It's like, oh, okay,
Oh,
say hi. Yes, I know. So yeah, I think that the hydrokinesis is get out of there. The hydrokinesis is really cool, but it's also he's going to be able to use it effectively in a different way. I think Mira, there was certain magic aspect to it, and I think Aquaman is much more blunt force trauma.
and you get to see some of that in the opening to issue one,
Right,
which is huge. Um,
right,
we'll touch on the artwork in a minute because I can't not.
yeah.
But uh, when you know you've got a character like Aquaman, who, as we were just saying, can be a little bit difficult to break people into, how do you start issue one when you're trying to
Yeah.
say, "Cool, this is what I can do with this character. I can show you how big this can be, but I can show you how much character is in here as well." Where did that kind of
How?
come
Uh,
from?
you know, I, I mean, Neil, I've been writing a lot of like movies and whatever, and you're always looking for an in.
Yeah,
And I definitely was thinking about some of my favorite shows and movies that have that kind of like, it's like Mission Impossible 3, where, it opens with Ethan's wife being shot,
yeah,
and you're like, what?
yeah.
Or more to the point, there's this amazing, and I'm actually surprised they let me do this. I think they tried to stop me from doing it at a certain point because
Doing
I
it.
did the 1 year later, and people were like, "Well, should we put that in?" I'm like, yeah, that's the whole point." Um, there's a great anime called Tengatop and Gurren Lagann, or Gurren Lagann in America. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's
Oh,
unbelievable, and
no.
it starts with like this like fight in space, and it's crazy, and then it shoots back in time to this kid underground with a little drill, and you're like, what is this, like, what, how does he go from here to there? And so the anticipation of that journey, I think, is really exciting. It's a way to hook people in. It's
Yeah,
also telling people right away that, and I struggled with it. I was trying to figure out, like, how do I differentiate what this is going to be? And because there's a lot of disparate voices saying, hey, it needs to be this or it needs to be this.
yeah,
And I just planted a flag and go, like, this is not about him as this. It's not about him as this. It's about him as Arthur, Curry, the God killer. But also, it's also about all these things. It really is like more of a recap. Like, this is who he is, but
yeah.
this is what he's going to become. And in that is so much mystery and so much intrigue, I hope, that people will be like, well, I want to know what that journey is. I want to know how he goes from this to this.
Yeah.
And we'll see. We'll see if it pans out.
And that puts me in mind of, I mean, again, I am a gentleman of a certain age, but
Yes.
shows like, I'm sure Supernatural did it, but shows like
Yeah.
Alias or any of those
Yes.
type of shows from the
Oh,
kind of the
time jumps.
where you open halfway through the story where your hero is at a particular point of conflict,
Yeah.
and then like 24 minutes earlier
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
4 days later.
I am a sucker. I am literally a fish on a hook when it comes to things like that. Yeah, Alias for sure. I was such a diehard Alias fan, man. Oh, that I kept thinking
I have tried.
they would integrate them into the Mission Impossible universe. I was like, if they
Mm.
say SD6 once, I will lose my mind.
Totally. Also, writing my questions for this, so hard to avoid any kind of fish reference or
Right.
nautical reference. I'm like
Yeah, no.
radar, hook, ugh, fish out of water, or there is a
Yeah,
fish
yeah. Dive in. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Over my head. Yeah, yeah. All that stuff. Yeah.
kind of going back to that big moment in the opening of this and this whole issue, which I've read. Oh my God. I put in my notes, it's breathtakingly beautiful. And I thought that
Yeah.
sounds really pretentious. But oh my God, John Timms and Rex
I know.
Locust. It's beautiful.
I feel so embarrassed that they have to draw my words. Like
Oh my.
I feel this way all the time though, because it's like with Zermanico on Green Lantern, I'm like, well, it's 100%
Yeah.
successful because of him, like Fernando. It's like I just go, I'm in awe
Mm,
of their abilities. And John, I had never worked with him before, obviously, and then
yeah.
I met him in New York, which makes me even love his art more because he's such a nice guy.
Yeah.
And now getting to know what it is that not what he's good at, because I think he's good at anything, but as a writer, learning that like, oh, look at what he can do
Yeah.
opens up my brain for what he can do. And
He-
he's really, I mean, like the double page spreads are amazing, but like I'll put like 6 or 7 panels and he'll make them seem seamless and
mm,
they don't feel crowded and they feel wide and they feel good. But the underwater and the kineticness that he can do underwater, I think is a
exactly.
real special thing that not a lot of people can do.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, I've got it on screen next to me here. It's so vibrant and it's so
Yeah.
full of life in every single panel. And
Yeah.
like you
And
said,
Rex helps with that too. Like
it's,
they're all
yeah.
so good.
The full copy that I had read is not the fully colored one, but I've
Yeah.
seen the colored pages, and it is just
Yeah.
I think it's going to be something really special when people get to see it.
Hope
But
so.
you kind of touched on it a little bit there. But what I wanted to ask you was whether when you see those pages then come in,
Yeah.
does that just make you go, okay, they can handle this. Let's go even bigger. Let's go even further. Let's
Yeah.
make you want to push it further.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely like the lesson with
Yeah.
Fernando on the Flash. It was definitely a lesson with Germanico. It's like the minute I realized, oh shoot, he's like his space stuff is so good. With
Yeah.
John, he- like I'm not concerned because he's just good at what he does.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly pestering him or just like, what do you want to draw? Like I'm happy to
Oh,
incorporate, like what do you love? Like I'll
yeah.
put in anything. And I do that with Will Conrad on Flash Gordon. I'm like, what do you want? He's like, dinosaurs. I'm like, dinosaurs it is. Like it's like I will immediately put it in somehow. And it makes me excited because I want them to be excited. And John
Yeah.
is such a good, like he can draw Aquaman so stoically and then draw these, crazy creatures. It does definitely make me go, I
Yeah.
don't, I don't, I don't generally worry about the artists because DC has hired so many amazing artists at such a level
Yeah.
that I'm not that concerned. I'm more concerned that like my stuff sucks. You know, I'm
It's
so self-focused that I'm just like, well, no one will ever hire me again after this. But I'm grateful that John seems to be not just excited, but like game
yeah.
to want to do more. And this is going to be a weird Aquaman run. I think it's just going to be different for a while.
Yeah. Well,
Whether or not people like that, I think people are going to be annoyed. Everybody keeps asking me, like, what about this character, with this character, this character? And I'm like, just read issue 1, and then I don't have
mm,
to beat
let
around
it
the
cook.
bush.
Yeah. Let it cook. You'll see what happens. Well, look, as far as I'm concerned, you deserve just as much praise as they do because everything you do is amazing. I
Thank
always
you.
think when your name is attached, there is nothing that needs to be worried about. Before we get kicked off this call, while we have a
Yes.
minute, what can you tease? What do you want to tease about what's coming up? What can you say?
What can
Let's
we
not
say?
spoil too much.
There is going to be, even in issue 2, there's going to be a surprise character that appears. There is going to be more investigation of the blue and about Atlantis. And as we get further along, my mind is swimming with ideas. There's a lot of characters, a lot of water-based characters and creatures that maybe we haven't seen in the DCU proper, or if we have, we barely seen them.
Yeah.
That I want to integrate into the Aquaman universe. And it's also playing on this all in. If you read the All In special and you saw the thing with Darkseid and you see the end of Aquaman, there's a lot of that will explain, has to do with kind of a prophecy that may or may not pertain to Aquaman. So there you
Can't
go.
wait. Thank you, as always.
Oh, as always, Neil.
Always great to chat to you.
Same,
I look forward to it. So
same.
hopefully we'll get a chance to circle back on this and maybe a little bit later on and see
That'd
where
be
it went.
great. Yeah, that'd be great. Always love hanging out.
Thank you again to DC Comics for arranging that for us. We've had a great little run of interviews. Please, if you haven't already, go back and listen to my chat with Tate Bromble about Batgirl, and then Ram V and Evan Cagle on New Gods, as well as obviously this really wonderful interview with Jeremy about Aquaman. Now, I could be really careful with what I want to say about this book because it's not out for a couple of weeks yet and I don't want to spoil anything, but it really is majestic. As we were talking about in the interview, Aquaman is a bit of a tough nut to crack in the DC universe. Lots of people have tried. There's been many different runs, many different iterations. We've seen lots of different versions on film and animation and stuff like that. But this is a really, really fun one. I really like what Jeremy is doing with this character. He's got a bit of an interesting way into this world because of what has happened with All In and Absolute Power. So the kind of status quo has shifted a little bit, which is interesting to read. Also, the events of this book, which I am not going to spoil, set him on a really interesting trajectory, which is quite central to All In, but is also going to be a really wonderful character tale about Arthur himself as well. And you just, honestly, you cannot beat John Tim's artwork, especially teamed with Rex Locus's colours. When I first received a copy of this book, when we were planning to do the interview, I absolutely fell in love with it so quickly because it just looks incredible. It's so crisp and contemporary and bright and dynamic, and just everything about it is outstanding. So please do go pick it up in comic book stores from January the 8th. That is all I am going to say. I am going to leave you to the rest of your holidays. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, Happy New Year. We'll be back with brand new episodes very, very soon. So I look forward to greeting you to a brand new Geico podcast. Until then, stay safe, stay well. Bye.